ROI, return on investment. Okay. When you're buying real estate for investment, it's not your dream house, right? You're buying income. Okay. So there's two types of ROI when it comes to real estate. You have your monthly income, right? That's your month to month income and expenses and what that looks like. And then you have your appreciation over time, right? You hold this asset for a number of years. Ideally, it will be worth more than when you paid, than when you bought it, right? So that's a separate blog. We'll cover that in another video. This video is your monthly metrics, right? The numbers that you need to know every month when you're comparing properties. Should you buy the property or not buy the property? We have some really good tools on our website to help you make that decision. And obviously, we help you as well. Right? Okay, so basically on your month to month, okay, so you think of this example right here. I'm looking at a 4-unit on the east side of Fall River. I'm looking at a 6-unit in the north end of Fall River, and maybe a 12-unit right next to the train station. Which one's the better investment? Not necessarily the cheapest one, right? So what are the metrics that we need to know, and how does it all come together? Okay, so the first metric here is net operating income. Okay, so that's the annual income after operating expenses, and you leave the debt service out, which is the mortgage. Okay, so NOI is annual rental income minus operating expenses. So if you have $48,000 of rent and $12,000 of expenses, you subtract that, you have $36,000 of net operating income. Okay, and that's the foundation for the cap rate and the DSCR, which we're going to cover next. Okay, so the next thing you have to know when you're shopping for rental property is cap rate. So that measures the profitability without financing. So what does that mean? So in that example that we used on the previous slide, where the rents were $48,000 a year with $12,000 a year of expenses, leaving $36,000, we would take that $36,000 and divide it by the purchase price. So if this property was $450,000, which, wow, this is probably a 2018 deal because that doesn't exist anymore in Fall River, but that's okay. So 36,000 divided by 450,000, that's an 8%, what's called a cap rate, right? So if we have those three different properties and we're analyzing them, and one of them's an 8, one of them's a 7, one of them's a 9, may not be the cheapest one, may not offer the highest return, or vice versa. Okay, so and that's where pricing comes in and stuff like that. So generally, I would say Fall River now, probably about a 6% cap rate, right? 10 years ago, it was a 12% cap rate. So the higher the cap rate, the riskier the investment, right? If you're gonna take on more risk, you should have more reward, right? So Fall River was a lot riskier 10 years ago. I'd say now it's definitely stabilized. There's a lot of growth with the waterfront, the train coming in. So 6% is probably realistic now. Boston, the good areas are probably 3 to 4% right now. So Fall River still beats Boston, which is why there's so much activity in our market. All right, DSCR. So if you're going to use financing, this is a number you need to know. Your bank's going to want to know this, okay? And in a nutshell, it checks if the income covers the mortgage payments. So we take that net operating income again, and we divide that by the annual debt service. So the annual debt service is the principal and interest that you're going to pay over 12 months. So in this case, if your mortgage was $2,000 a month, principal and interest, that's $24,000 of debt service. If your income's $36,000, you divide that, it's 1.5. All right. Most lenders want to see about 1.25 or greater. Okay. So if the income doesn't cover the debt, that's probably not a good investment. Okay. So you got to know these terms and you got to know how they all work together. Okay. Cash on cash return. Well, if you're using debt or you're paying cash, you're putting money down. Okay. So if a property, if you have to put $120,000 down to buy a property, and it generates $12,000 a year of cash flow, then that's a 10% return on your cash. So you as an investor have to ask yourself, is that a return I'm willing to accept on my cash, right? You may be able to find other returns elsewhere. Again, the higher the return, the higher the risk, okay? And this doesn't factor tax benefits or anything like that. But, it's just good to know the cash that you put in as a down payment or purchase the property, the cash flow that it returns annually, the profit. What is that return on my cash, right? What am I putting in my pocket against my cash? So if we go back here where this had $36,000 a year of net operating income against $24,000 in debt, you'll notice the difference is the $12,000. That $12,000 here, divided by the 120 you would have put down is your 10%. Okay. So that's how all these numbers work. And these are very basic numbers. All right. And another term you got to be familiar with is vacancy rate. So what is vacancy rate? That's the percentage of time a property is unoccupied. Guys, I can build you the best spreadsheet in the world and tell you what the rent should be, but you never collect 100% of your rents. You never do. So very important on your pro forma, you need to factor vacancy, okay? A good rule of thumb is you'll probably not see at least 1 month a year of every unit, which is 8.33%, right? You figure if somebody moves out, takes a month to turn it over and rent it out. Maybe 3 of your 4 units are rented all year. And the 4th unit, you had to evict the guy and you lost 4 months of rent. Same idea, right? So it's 8.33%. I like to be conservative when I'm working with clients or I'm making an investment. So I tease up my vacancy rate. I'll go as high as 10 or 15% just to make sure that it works, right? Because you never know. So you have to understand that there is a percentage of rent that you're never going to collect. Okay. So that's a very important one. All right. And then reserves. Guys, these buildings are old. We talk about this a lot in our blogs and stuff like that. There are going to be repairs that you're going to have to make. So you have to budget for that. So take a percentage, 5 to 10% of your annual rent, and put it aside for reserves. Future you will thank yourself. Okay. Now, if you understand these and you want to kind of use these tools, we have a great tool on our site, on our investor toolkit. And basically, it's an analyzer that you can use if you're thinking about a deal that you want to buy, and you plug everything in here and it has all this. So you put all your income in. Okay. You put your expenses, what your vacancy, see it defaults to 10% vacancy rate. Management percentage, reserves, put all this stuff in, and then it'll give you kind of a tree of what you pay for the property and what those returns are. And you can see here, debt service coverage ratio, cap rate, all right, cash on cash return, monthly cash flow, everything's in here. All right. So we have all these tools. So if you're thinking of investing in real estate, you have to understand these metrics. And these metrics are what, if you understand these metrics, you're going to be very successful. I'm a real estate agent. I've been selling real estate for almost 15 years. Most real estate agents, when they list multifamily property, especially in Fall River, I think sometimes they just make up numbers. So never trust the returns that are put on the listing. Always, always, always get somebody like me to help you. Let's put real numbers down. Let's stress test this building. Let's stress test this investment and make sure you don't have any surprises. Because guys, if it works at a 15% vacancy rate, it's going to work a lot better at an 8% vacancy rate if that's what it really gets in person. All right. So if you like what you see, you have any questions, just click on the my little video on the bottom right of the website and reach out, and I will reach out to you right away, and we'll schedule a consultation and we'll answer whatever questions you have. All right, guys. Thanks.